Former President Trump, he's back at it this time. He's in Pennsylvania. They know a thing or two about manufacturing there, right? But get this. Instead of going after another candidate, Trump sets his sights on John Deere.
John Deere?
Yeah, the tractor company.
Wow.
It's like, what?
What's going on here?
It's this weird moment where, like, tractors become this symbol for anxieties about trade and globalization, and are American jobs going to be there?
Yeah, because John Deere is so American.
Exactly. They're like Americana, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just a casual diss. Like, Trump goes full tariff threat, 200% on John Deere products coming in from Mexico if he gets back in office.
200%. I mean, that's huge.
It's a really big number.
Yeah, most tariffs are way lower, like single digits, maybe low double digits, 200%. That's the statement.
Yeah, it's like he took the tariff knob and just cranked it up to 11.
Yeah, exactly.
So to really understand this, we got to talk about like what tariffs actually do, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, they're taxes on imported goods.
Mm.
The idea is you make those foreign products pricier, so people are more likely to buy American-made stuff.
Okay.
So in theory, jobs stay here.
Right.
But 200%, that's got to be sticker shock, right?
Huge sticker shock.
Like imagine you're at the John Deere dealership about to finally get that new tractor you've been saving up for, and bam, the price just doubled overnight.
Yeah. Ouch.
So we've got John Deere, this very American company, but like a lot of companies these days, they've got factories all over the world, including Mexico, which is what Trump is targeting.
Right. And it's interesting because their response wasn't some kind of panicked, like, oh, no, we're sorry. They basically just said, hold on a second.
Yeah, it was a very like John Deere response.
Very measured.
They put out a statement saying less than 5% of what they sell in the U.S. actually comes from Mexico.
Yeah, it was like they deflected a cannonball with a fly swatter.
Totally.
Like Trump's out there saying John Deere is shipping jobs overseas, but their own numbers tell a different story.
So what's actually going on here?
I think it shows how these narratives, especially with politics and economics, they can take on a life of their own.
Yeah.
Like, even if the reality is more complicated, and with Deere, they make most of what they sell here in the U.S.
Right.
But that image of American jobs going away, that's powerful stuff.
It really is. And John Deere, they didn't stop there. They hit back with another point.
Oh, yeah.
They've had a presence in Mexico since, get this, 1952.
Wow.
Not some recent move to like chase cheap labor or what. This is a decades-long relationship.
Right. It's not some new thing.
It's a part of their history.
Yeah. It makes it a lot harder to just paint them as the bad guy, outsourcing jobs. I mean, they have operations everywhere. Their supply chains are all over the globe.
It's like a giant puzzle.
Yeah.
And tariffs are like try to fix it by just focusing on one tiny piece.
Yeah. You can't just like wiggle one thing and expect the whole thing to fall into place.
Exactly. And you got to think about the human side of all this. Like, imagine you're a farmer in Iowa, the heart of John Deere country, right?
Right where they're from.
You hear a politician saying he's going to crack down on companies sending jobs overseas. That might sound pretty good on the surface.
Sure.
But then what if that means the tractor you need to keep your farm running? What if that suddenly costs twice as much because of those tariffs?
Yeah, then it's not so simple anymore.
It hits a lot closer to home.
Exactly. Those big economic policies, those pronouncements, they always filter down. They affect real people, real businesses in a very real way.
For sure. And speaking of real consequences, this whole John Deere thing gets even crazier. Remember that trade deal Trump signed with Mexico and Canada?
The USMCA?
Yeah.
That one.
I thought we were done with acronyms.
Almost there.
Yeah.
But it turns out that might actually throw a wrench into his whole tariff threat.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Stick around for this because you won't believe what happens next.
Okay. What's next?
So it's like we've got Trump on one hand promising these tariffs. You know, he's going to stick it to John Deere, bring back American jobs, that whole thing.
Right. Classic campaign rhetoric. Exactly. But then on the other hand, you got this trade deal. He already signed the USMCA, and it's like those two things don't really get along.
Yeah, it's a great example of how, like, what you say on the campaign trail and then what you can actually do when you're in office, those two things don't always match up.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
So break it down for us. What is the USMCA, and how does it connect to this whole John Deere tariff thing?
Okay, so the USMCA, it stands for the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Kind of a mouthful.
Yeah, I like the acronym better.
Me too. But basically, it replaced the old NAFTA agreement, and it went into effect in 2020.
And Trump was a big fan of it, right?
Oh, yeah. He presented it as this huge win for America, renegotiating trade deals, making them better for us.
Bringing back jobs, boosting manufacturing. That was the whole idea.
Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. The USMCA has this part in it that basically says no new tariffs between the countries.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's all about promoting free trade between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada.
So Trump's big trade deal, the one he's bragging about, could have actually stopped him from putting those tariffs on John Deere.
It's kind of ironic, right?
Totally.
But it just goes to show how complicated international trade really is. There's all these different factors at play: domestic politics, campaign promises, international agreements, and they don't always line up neatly.
So was this whole thing about John Deere, was it ever really about changing what they do, or was it more about tapping into that frustration people have with globalization? Even if the details were kind of fuzzy.
It's a good question, and it makes you think about tariffs in general. Like, on the surface, they seem simple, protect American jobs, done.
Right.
But when you dig a little deeper, it's way more nuanced.
Okay, so let's unpack that then.
Yeah.
Say you're a farmer, you need a new tractor. Suddenly there's this tariff making it way more expensive.
Ouch. Yeah, that's going to hurt.
It would hurt a lot of people.
And that's the thing. Tariffs get passed down the line. Consumers end up paying more for things. Businesses that use imported parts, they feel it too.
It's like a ripple effect.
Exactly. And then there's always the chance of retaliation. Like, one country puts up tariffs, another country says, oh, yeah, well, we're going to put tariffs on your stuff, and then you've got a trade war.
Nobody wins in a trade war.
Exactly. Prices go up, businesses struggle. It's a mess.
So it's not as simple as slapping a tariff on something and then suddenly American workers are doing great.
Not at all. Remember those reactions we talked about to Trump's John Deere threat? Mark Cuban called it insanity. He said it would destroy the company.
And Cuban knows a thing or two about business.
He definitely does. And then you've got Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa.
Iowa John Deere territory.
Exactly. And he's been against tariffs under both Trump and Biden.
Which is interesting because Iowa is right in the middle of all this. The agriculture, the manufacturing.
Exactly. And Grassley's point is that tariffs end up hurting the very people they're supposed to be helping: American farmers, manufacturers, even consumers.
So even within the same political party, you've got these different opinions about tariffs, different ideas about what works and what doesn't.
It just goes back to that complexity we were talking about. It's never black and white. There are always trade-offs, unintended consequences.
Makes you think.
It definitely does.
So we've talked about tariffs, what they might do, what they probably won't do. But what about other options? If the goal is to support American jobs and make sure our economy is strong, are there other things we could be doing instead of tariffs, or maybe in addition to them?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the interesting thing is there's no one right answer. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
So we've gone from a campaign stop all the way to, like, global trade agreements. And it all started with John Deere and a promise from Trump.
It really is amazing how one little comment about a 200% tariff can open up all these huge questions about globalization, American jobs, you name it.
Yeah, it kind of makes you think differently about that tractor you see driving down the road.
Right, like there's a whole world of economics and politics hidden behind that John Deere logo.
Exactly. And that's what we try to do with these deep dives, right? Start with something that seems pretty simple, and then suddenly you're like, wait a minute, there's all this other stuff going on.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Exactly. And it reminds us that there are always different sides to every story, different things to consider.
And sometimes there's no easy answers.
For sure. And that brings us to our final thought for this deep dive on John Deere and tariffs. We've talked about what tariffs might do, what they probably won't do, but what about other options?
Right. Like if we're really serious about supporting American jobs and making sure our economy is strong, what else could we be trying?
Right. Instead of just putting up walls, what about giving American workers the tools they need to compete in a global economy?
Yeah, exactly. Like investing in education and training, making sure people have the skills they need for the jobs of the future.
Because those jobs are changing all the time, right?
Exactly. So instead of just trying to recreate the jobs we used to have, maybe we need to be focusing on creating the jobs that'll be around for years to come.
So things like technology innovation.
Absolutely. Things like robotics, artificial intelligence, all that stuff that's changing how we make things.
And that stuff's not going away anytime soon.
Nope. It's only going to get bigger, so we need to be ready for it.
I was like, we need to find that sweet spot where America is competitive in the global market, but also making sure that the benefits of that are felt here at home by American workers.
Exactly. It's a balancing act for sure.
It really is well said.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into John Deere tariffs and that presidential promise, remember, keep asking those tough questions, seek out different viewpoints, and never stop being curious.
Because you never know where that curiosity might lead you.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe we'll see you down the road for another deep dive.